Welcome. Welcome and good morning. My name is Stephen Wolf Foster, and I am a worship associate for this morning. Welcome to the First Religious Society Unitarian Universalist in Newburyport, Massachusetts, to this very special service, which we are celebrating here in person and online. So good to see you all. If you are visiting today or joining us for the first time, we are especially glad you are with us this morning. We do have a few special things to make note of this morning. Next Sunday is our annual meeting, and this will happen at 10:30 a.m. We need a quorum of at least 100 people to vote on the business of the church. Please sign up online. Everyone is welcome to join the meeting, though only members vote. Later that Sunday at 3, we will be ordaining Sophia Lyons. A very special occasion when a congregation uses our power to ordain a layperson into a reverend. Everyone of all ages is welcome. You really don't want to miss this. It is sure to transform us all. Lastly, our annual raffle is underway, and this is your chance to win a trip for two to go anywhere in the world. Odds are very good, with a maximum of 2,500 tickets to be sold, and I hear we are far beneath that number. So get your tickets, online only, today. And you can scan the QR card if you're here from ushers. We're living in challenging times. Forces press upon us that suggest that we best live in fear and separation and blame. Instead, we choose to come together as a church, a community committed to love, peace, and justice. Our core values are authentic connection and courageous action, love and spirituality, and wonder. Our mission and our invitation to you all. Come as you are. Journey together in love. Act with courage. Transform our world. As you join us online, there are links you can click to see today's order of service. If you joined from YouTube, the links are just below the live stream. Please click on the word "See More" if necessary to see them. If you are watching from our website, there are buttons below the live stream. Folks joining us on Zoom will find the link in the chat window right about now. Every Sunday we say it's no small thing that we have gathered. This morning it is a particularly big thing that we have gathered. So let's give ourselves to it. I welcome one and all to our church, to our worship service, and thank you. It's good to be together.
Our call to worship this morning are the words of Myra, the most renowned female poet and saint of India, entitled 100 Objects Close By. I know a cure for sadness. Let your hands touch something that makes your eyes smile. I bet there are 100 objects close by that can do that. Look at beauty's gift to us. Her power is so great, she enlivens the earth, the sky, and our soul. You are joyfully called to worship. And please join now in our chalice lighting words as Stephen Wolf lights our chalice. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Each week, we also light 2 candles of peace, representing 2 places on earth which we lift up and remember as a sacred encounter with our world. There are untold numbers of places on earth that need peace. These 2 we especially hold close in this service and through the week ahead. And this morning, as is the custom when we are worshiping outside and online, we'll be lighting these candles in our hearts and our mind's eye. After each one is shared, I invite you to respond together with the words, peace, salam, shalom. Our first candle this morning is lit for Gaza and its surrounding lands, where tension and extreme violence have once again erupted. We pray that diplomacy prevail in this longest standing of disputes and for the safety of all the Israeli and Palestinian people. Peace, salam, shalom. Our second candle this morning is lit for Afghanistan, and in particular the women and the children, girls, and those who lost their lives in a recent shooting. May the determination and commitment that these women and girls have towards their education and empowerment prevail. Peace, salam, shalom. This morning, we also light a candle of hope and remembrance in our hearts and mind's eye in recognition of the COVID-19 pandemic, all those who are struggling for economic security and return, all those fighting for their health and return of their health, and all those who have lost their lives and those who love them. We will continue to light this candle each time we worship, for as long as we live into this worldwide reality. And please join now in our affirmation of faith. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God.
So as we will not have a formal offering time this morning, you are encouraged to make contribution online or at the welcome table as you depart from the service here, or online using a link provided. This month, our offering supports Emmaus, spelled E-M-M-A-U-S, Inc., which serves more than 2,500 homeless women, men, and children from Merrimack Valley and North Shore each year. And now we will sing our young children to outdoor young church by humming This Little Light of Mine.
It's a hum.
It's a hum.
Greg, are you able to help me out here?
This morning we share joys and sorrows from our congregation that were submitted to us in advance. We hold Carol and Stan Kilty in our hearts and prayers. Carol writes, "Stanley and I have had a difficult few weeks. He has had another stroke, which has affected his vision. I have had an event that the doctor is calling a small stroke, to do with a closed artery going to the brain. I have minor symptoms that I can manage, but it is making us both tired. The aging process is not easy. Thinking about all who are having health problems during an already chaotic time and hoping the arrival of spring will at least ease the mental stress." We share the recent joys and sorrows within our community. Jennifer Wellman is home after having COVID-19 and a shot. She was away from March 18th to May 1st. She writes, "It is so good to be home. Thank you for all your prayers." Please hold Chuck Carroll and his family in your thoughts and prayers. He was recently diagnosed with metastatic cancer and will begin chemotherapy next week. We light a virtual candle of joy for the wedding this afternoon of Susan Thorne and Mark Simon. Reverend Rebecca will be officiating. Congratulations, Susan and Mark. We celebrate with Jason McClinn and his family as he graduates from seminary this afternoon. Congratulations, Jason. Jonathan March and Jean Anderson mourn the loss of John's mother, Edith A. March, born January 29th, 1929. She died last week at home in Milford, New Hampshire, at age 92. And we offer our thoughts and prayers for those joys and sorrows that have gone unmentioned. Please join me now in a moment of silence. Amen.
Our reading this morning is entitled, "This Much I Know," written by a dear friend and poet laureate in Connecticut, Christine Beck. This much I know. I know I'll always want to call my mom, to say I saw a cardinal, a goldfinch, or a hummingbird. I know in that moment I'll forget she's been dead over 40 years, that she never got to be a grandma. I know I love the things she treasured, her copy of the Renoir above my bathtub, her silver bracelet, the crystal perfume flack on my dressing table, her initialed silver soap dish that's tarnished with the silver plate worn off. I know the violets that peek up in the spring remind me of the ones I picked, placed in a silver vase, a shy surprise for my mother every year. She taught me to extend my fingers down their slender stems, to reach close to the earth before I plucked them. Such short stems, those violets. In weeks, their foliage will grow over to obscure the blooms. They'll die, but in early spring they look so hopeful, as if they will last forever. I'll take delight in playing with my granddaughter, fishing where she pretends to be the fish and I pull her in with a satin sash. Airport, where she packs her stuffed animals in my suitcase, drags it down the hall, cheerily calling, "I'll be back soon." Purple Kitty, where I own a pet store, and she wants to buy a magical kitten, one that turns out to be herself. I know there are mysteries I'll poke and prod, yet never understand. How my pretty, charming mother fell in with Jehovah's Witnesses, why she tried so hard to save the souls of strangers, when in her own home dwelled souls as flimsy as the tissue paper on a discarded gift. I know that every wound, every slight, all can be healed by the morning song of cardinal, the flash of wing of hummingbird, the willingness to take my place gently in the world, as if I were a violet, a slender springtime stem, hopeful face turned to the sun, a violet among a field of flowers that all look the same, yet each unique as a child's imaginary game, one that requires a suitcase, a trip, a going back. This much I know for sure.
Make kindness sure wherever you will find that being kind makes this world a better place. World of human race. It's a gift you can give. all know someone who could use a hand. Our kind of sympathetic gift. Seize the moment. Let it slip away. Find someone in need. Let an act of kindness be your reply. Make kindness your golden rule. Whatever you do, you will find that being kind makes this world a better place for the human race. Make kindness your golden rule. Make kindness your golden rule.
Thank you, Greg. So beautiful. What worship it is, just to be together. However you are, wherever you are. And the birds agree. Do you believe in God? I don't believe. I know. I don't believe. I know. This is one of my all-time favorite film clips. The twinkle in Dr. Carl Jung's eye and the childlike grin that filled his face bring me such joy. It wasn't even the words. It was his expression, the joy in his eyes and on his face. He was being interviewed by a BBC journalist in his home in Switzerland in 1959. And equally amusing to me, after I was just entranced by what overtook him, was the journalist's response. So he was either caught completely off guard by Jung's response, or he was very rigid. Because after the great man answered the question with such passion, the journalist looked ahead and said, "And how is it you became to be a doctor?" Wait, I wanted to scream. Wait a minute. Did you hear? Did you see what just transpired? Tell me more, Dr. Jung. I wanted to say, tell me more. I was sitting in the C.G. Jung Institute of New England in Newton, Massachusetts, when this happened. My heart beat so fast in recognition when the great doctor spoke of knowing God. I leaned forward on my plastic chair, willing this man to come back alive from the screen. I wanted to ask him about his knowing and see if it reflected my own experience. If I could, I would have said, "Tell me, is it the exchange of love?" Is it the exchange of love and the experience of transcendence? Like the first time I saw my newborn daughter's translucent fingernails? Their tiny moon shape, reminding me of wax paper, and the silver medallion-shaped tree seeds on my grandparents' money tree in their backyard. Tell me, is it that same knowing that Wendell Berry writes about so eloquently in his poetry, particularly for me when he says, when despair of the world grows deep, he goes to lay where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. This much I know, writes Christine Beck, whose work I just shared. This much I know I'll always want to call my mom, to say I saw a cardinal, a goldfinch, or a hummingbird. I know there are mysteries I'll poke and prod, yet never understand. I know that every wound, every slight, all can be healed by the morning song of cardinal, the flash of wing of hummingbird, the willingness to take my place gently in the world, as if I were a violet, among a field of flowers that all look the same, yet each as unique as a child's imaginary game. Knowing is sacred. It is different than believing, thinking, or learning. Knowing comes from within us. It is relational. It moves between us and the world, physical and imaginal. It is the closest experience that I have of understanding this concept, experience, called God, love, connection. If you listen carefully, people tell you what they know all the time. Pay attention, for they are telling you what sustains them. Their grandchild, kayaking, the weather, the sunlight, what they experience within and in relationship to. I could share so many stories of this. I'll just offer one. In seminary, one of my very, very favorite dear professors, a Southern Baptist minister, and of course academic and author, said this one day as we were discussing this concept. He said, "It's like this. I know my daughter. I know my daughter so well that it brings me great joy to buy her punk rock music, even though I cannot stand listening to it." We live in a world, my friends, that if we're not careful and alert, will pull us away from such intimacy and knowing into states of reaction, freneticism, fear, blaming, anger. And the more angry and frightened and overwhelmed we get, sometimes, the harder we work, we research, we think, we Google, we plan, we write. What if when we were that dysregulated, as by the way I was yesterday, so this is not anything I don't experience on a regular basis, but I'll tell you, all my plans don't make it work. What if, when that happens, instead of all those things, when a problem looms so big that it overtakes our clarity, what if we put it down momentarily and turned to what we know? It can be as simple as a beloved house plant or the scent of lilac coming through open windows. You might think there's a big difference between caring for a house plant and knowing God. I've heard and read astrophysicists, cosmologists, and environmentalists speak about galaxies, creation, and wood frogs the same way Dr. Jung spoke of God. They're all describing an exchange of intimacy, wonder, and love. It is the intimacy, the immediacy, and the knowing that makes it sacred. And to do this, or at least for me, in my own experience, I've learned I need to start and stay, or at least return, to something specific, often quite small. Richard Rohr says, if you want to understand and know love, start with a stone. Children naturally do this. Watch a child fall in love with a leaf they've discovered, how they make it float in a puddle, and then they stick it to their rain boot. How delighted they are when they begin to run down the sidewalk and that leaf stays on their rain boot. And then how dutifully they stop to retrieve it from the ground when it eventually falls. Children love this world by loving the particular. And so do we. In her book, Everyday Sacred, Susan Bender writes about a friend of hers who had moved to New York City and was completely overwhelmed. She found the sounds and the busyness and the people and the smells too much. She wasn't sure she could stay. So what she did is she focused on a 2-block radius around her house, her apartment. She got to know the shopkeepers, the dogs that were walked every morning, the plants that grew in the pots at the bottom of the steps. And these 2 blocks became her sanctuary. From there, she would venture into the city because she knew she always had that place to return to, the place she called home. The love that is generated from this kind of knowing of a place, a person, or a part of nature is like nothing else. It calms us, sustains us, and empowers us. I believe it's the reason that Dr. Jung's eyes twinkled when he answered that question. And to come back to that in closing, his comment produced, as you might imagine, quite the uproar, with all kinds of discussion and hypothesizing and wanting to understand. People wanted to know what he meant by God. It's a fascinating story, best understood in the context of his work that he devoted his life to. He wrote and shared later that it was in the subconscious of his own mind, that he met something greater than himself. Something that he happened to call God. Is that what you understand? Does it matter? I don't think so. I think what matters is that we have the capacity to live with such knowing wherever you experience that. And so may we all be so blessed to experience the knowing, the kind that heals us, soothes us, inspires us, and reminds us we are home. Amen.
Good morning. So last spring, like many of you, I found a great deal of solace in nature. Each day I walked in the woods, generally not traveling far from home, but just getting someplace where I could feel my feet on the earth and be in the company of trees. About 1 week into the pandemic, in one of many conversations I had at the time in which folks traded trail information, Florence Mercer asked if I had yet walked on Whittier Hill. It turns out that Whittier Hill, a greenbelt property, was hiding within a 15-minute walk of my house. I had no idea. I found it the very next day at the end of a small street named Witcher Court, across from the Amesbury Town Park. The Whittier Hill Trail, as its name would suggest, is a fairly steep incline that eventually plateaus and ends after perhaps half a mile at one of Amesbury's beautiful open spaces, Woodsome Farm. There is really nothing unusual about Whittier Hill. It's your fairly typical mixed hardwood forest. But there was something about it that felt unusual. I had a strong feeling of connectedness. Something deep within me felt touched somehow. I was drawn back to the trail again and again. I did a little research on Whittier Hill and found this on the Greenbelt website. Whittier Hill is named for Thomas Whittier, who sailed for America in 1638, though it was pronounced Witcher Hill by locals from the early years of Amesbury. Thomas Whittier's great-grandson, America's Quaker poet and abolitionist John Greenleaf Whittier, lived in a home below the hill for 56 years. Though he was colorblind, John Greenleaf Whittier was known to climb the hill to watch the setting sun, and the view from Whittier Hill is described in the opening lines of his poem, The Preacher. Far down the vale, my friend and I beheld the old and quiet town, the ghostly sails that out at sea flapped their white wings of mystery, the beaches glimmering in the sun, and the low wooded capes that run into the sea mist north and south, the sand bluffs at the river's mouth, the swinging chain bridge, and afar, the foam line of the harbor bar. Well, that's pretty cool, I thought. But did it explain my strong pull to the place? Now, fast forward a couple of months. I began to do some genealogy work, another popular activity during the pandemic, it seems. And yes, I did also take up sourdough baking, in case you're wondering. I had been aware for some number of years that my 8th great-grandfather, Richard Currier, was one of the founders of the town of Amesbury, then Salisbury. My grandfather, Stanley Currier, had done a lot of genealogy work and had left us with a book of his findings, a real gold mine. So with that, and with the assistance of an online database, it's been quite easy to learn about my Amesbury roots. You might know where this story is going. You probably do. With a minimal amount of clicking, I found the last will and testament of Thomas Currier. Thomas was Richard's son, my 7th great-grandfather. Among the various tracts of land he left to his sons, I read this: I give and bequeath to my son William Currier 2 lots of land in Amesbury in a place called Witcher's Hill Division. I mean the 2 eastwardmost lots of that tract of land where his house now stands. It is of course not lost on me that my ancestors owned that land through colonialism. And always, when I walk the trail where my ancestors also walked, where they lived, I think about those who were there before we can connect. At the beginning of the pandemic, I walked in nature with reverence, with curiosity, and I was able to sense something special about Whittier Hill. It was a time, too, when I was open to the connection to my ancestors, colonizers though they were. It gave me strength and fortitude at a scary time to be reminded that I come from a long line of survivors. Because, of course, if they hadn't been survivors, I wouldn't be here. The land speaks to us if we're open to hearing. Through my work at the church, I've had the opportunity to visit the site of Wounded Knee twice as part of our youth justice learning trips to the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. My most frequent comment to people who ask about it is, even if you didn't know something happened there, you would know something happened there. It was, in fact, the site of a massacre of some 300 Lakota people in 1890 by the U.S. Army. Despite the vendors selling handmade crafts in the parking lot, there is an unmistakable air of grief and sorrow about the place. It's palpable. I mentioned this to some colleagues once, and a couple of them mentioned having that same feeling at Gettysburg. The land speaks to us. It tells us stories if we're open to listening. One of my spiritual teachers once told me that she believes that the land and nature yearn for a connection with us, just as we yearn for a connection with it. I love this idea. It's kind of our seventh principle on steroids. What if we are not just part of an interdependent web, but what if all the parts of the web actively seek connection? It's not an uncommon idea in certain spiritual traditions. I think particularly of Celtic spirituality, a tradition I'm drawn to largely through the work of Christine Walters Paintner and the writer, poet, and theologian John O'Donohue. In his book, Eternal Echoes, he writes, "I remember as a child discovering the echo of sound. It was the first time that my father took me up the mountain to herd the cattle. As we passed a limestone cliff, he called out to the cattle in the distance. His call had barely ended when it was copied exactly and sent forth again by the stone. It was a fascinating discovery. I tried out my own voice, and the echo returned faithfully every time. It was as if the solid limestone mountains had secret hearing and voice. Their natural stillness and silence suddenly broke forth in an exact mimic of the human voice, indicating that there is a resonant heart in the depths of silence. The stone responds in a symmetry of sound. Hearing one's echo out among the lonely mountains seems to suggest that one is not alone. Landscape and nature know us, and the returning echo seems to confirm that we belong here. We live in a world that responds to our longing. It is a place where the echoes always return, even if sometimes slowly. It is as if the dynamic symmetry of the echo comprised the radius of an invisible but powerful circle of belonging." The land seeks a connection, reaches out to hold us in belonging, and embraces us in its memory. In a beautiful essay on the Life Lab psychology website, Julie Leone writes about a special place in Dorset, England, where she has spent time over the years with friends and family. "The tread of so many footsteps," she writes, "so many walks to the sea and back, seems to imbue the path with me and them, a scent of us passing through, holding our memories for us each time we return." She also writes about the river behind her house, a special place for her and her children until some new neighbors built a barrier and they no longer had access. "And so the kids can no longer paddle or row or splash, for our bank is too steep and the water by us too deep," she writes. "So although the land holds those memory of kids and friends, I can no longer go there. It makes me sad, for the land holds those people that we were in those summers, after school, when the sun was shining and the kids were young." The land holds our memories. It holds us in memory. When we open ourselves to that, we see that we are held in those places. All of our ages and stages are held in the land we experience. Perhaps this is why the most precious piece of land in the world to me is the small plot on Muskoma Lake in New Hampshire, where my grandfather built a cottage when my mother was a girl. I've spent my life returning to that place over and over. I'm there as a tow-headed 5-year-old, walking down the dirt lane with my siblings. I'm there as a contemplative teenager, looking up into the tall pines from my place in a hammock. I'm there as a young mother, splashing in the water with my kids. I'm there at all ages, sitting in that spot where one has a perfect view of the sun dipping behind the hills at the end of the lake. A whole lifetime, me at every age, is there when I pay attention. I'm aware of that. I know it in the crunch of the pine needles beneath my feet, in the scent of the lake in the morning, in the sound of the loon late at night. I'm held in the memory of that place. In How to Walk, Thich Nhat Hanh writes, "Walk slowly, but not so slowly that you draw too much attention to yourself. This is a kind of invisible practice. Enjoy nature and your own serenity without making others uncomfortable or making a show of it." When we walk slowly in nature, when we pause, we know this. The land speaks to us. It teaches us. It seeks connection with us. It holds us in its memory.
Thank you, Julie. At this time, I invite us all to speak the words of our unison benediction as Stephen Wolfe extinguishes the chalice. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us now and always. My friends, as we depart from here this morning, I invite each and every one of us to find the knowing with that which we hold sacred. Find the exchange and the intimacy. And if you're wondering where to find it, simply stop. Look down. See the grass, or the ground, or the water. Come to know that place, and you will be healed. Go in peace, my friends, and return again in great joy. Amen, and blessed be.